I remember the smell first. Burnt toast and motor oil. Sarah had overbrowned the bread again, because Becky was chattering about show and tell, spinning circles in her socks on our linoleum like a wind-up toy that forgot how to stop. The radio in the kitchen was muttering about rain in Columbus, the kind that sticks to your bones. I was wiping my hands with a red shop rag, trying to rub out a stubborn smear of grease that had been living in the cracks of my knuckles since 1989. The screen door creaked open, and with it came the neighborhood, Geraldine Pike's yappy terrier, a garbage truck moaning down the block, damp leaves glued to the curb like soggy coins. I kissed Sarah's temple. She smelled like coffee and chalk dust, and Becky pressed a glittered sticker onto my palm, solemn as a notary. "For luck, Daddy," she said. Then the sirens didn't pass. They landed. 2 squad cars inhaled our driveway, blue lights stuttering against the porch posts. The sound rattled the plates in the cabinet. Sarah's mug clattered in the sink. Becky froze, sticker sheet suspended midair. The screen door banged again and held there, a mouth open on a scream. 3 officers stepped in tight formation, and behind them came Detective Carla Hughes, a woman whose eyes looked like they'd long ago decided on the right thing and then decided on it again. "Daniel Whitmore," she said. My name tasted like pennies in my mouth. "Ma'am?" I tried, voice too small for my chest. "Handcuffs are colder than you think. Colder than a January pipe. Colder than a winter key you lick by mistake." "What's happening?" Sarah's voice cracked on the second word. "There's been an incident at Bellamy's Corner Market," Detective Hughes said. "Arthur Bellamy was found dead before opening. We need to ask your husband some questions." "Questions?" I echoed, tongue slow, brain slower. Becky's fingers pinched the back of my shirt. Carla cleared her throat like the end of a prayer. "Daniel Whitmore, you are under arrest for the murder of Arthur Bellamy." The coffee smell burned off me like fog on hot pavement, and what rushed in was bleach and fear and the sharp, ugly scrape of the neighbor's screen door opening to watch. I tried to swallow. Something sharp was in the way. I looked at Sarah, and I swear her pupils were 2 black wells. I said, "This is a mistake." The detective said, "Let's hope so." And the porch light flickered, though it was daylight, as if the house itself knew to tremble, because somewhere, somehow, a wrench of mine had been found where it should never have been. They took me to a room that smelled like wet paper and old sweat, a room where the fluorescent lights hummed the same note as dread. The chair's metal pressed a cold line across my back. Carla Hughes sat across from me, a legal pad like a placemat for bad news. Her partner, Officer Neil Carver, a name I learned from the badge and the way he chewed his gum like it had insulted him, stood by the door. "You work on Bellamy's delivery truck last week?" she asked. "Thursday evening," I said. "Transmission was making a sound like a jar of marbles. Anyone with you?" "Just me." Arthur stayed late to lock up. I could see the market in my mind. The freezer's cough, the soda fridge fan pushing a thin, cold wind, the neon beer sign stuttering in the window like a heartbeat out of time. I had left after 9, the street empty, the awning flapping as if it were trying to lift off and leave the brick behind. Carla slid a photograph across the table. I couldn't look at it. I looked anyway. Arthur on the stockroom floor, eyes open to a ceiling he'd never see. The toolbox I'd given him months back sat open like a mouth that wanted to confess. She put down another photo, my 12-inch crescent wrench, the one with Whitmore scratched on the handle, black with something that wasn't oil. "My tools are all over this town," I said, my voice a trembling rope. "Everybody borrows them." "They found this one under Arthur," Carver said, "and a partial print." "My print would be on all of them," I said. "I fixed his ice machine every other week." "Where were you last night between 9 and midnight?" Carla asked. "Home," I said. "With Sarah." Becky fell asleep watching The Land Before Time on the couch. I could still feel Becky's weight, that warm little anchor. Sarah's head on my shoulder, popcorn salt in my beard. "Anyone else see you?" Carla asked. My pause was the kind that gets underlined in someone's notes. "No," I said. "No one else." She wrote something, the scratch of the pen like a tiny saw. "Cash was missing," Carver said. "Arthur kept a deposit bag sometimes. You know anything about that?" "No." My mouth felt like a glove turned inside out. Carla breathed out slow. "Daniel, we have a witness." I licked my lip. "Who?" "A man," she said carefully, "who places you at Bellamy's at 10:30 p.m. My heart thudded, stupid as a hammer. "Who?" I asked again, the word catching. Carla looked at Carver, then back at me. "We'll get to that," she said. "For now, I need your fingerprints. And we'll be searching your house." I pictured Sarah on the porch, arms around Becky, watching strangers unzip our lives. "I didn't kill Arthur," I said to the metal table. The table said nothing back. Somewhere in the station, a phone rang and rang. And rang, like the world knew me and was choosing not to pick up. They processed me. That pretty word for stripping a man down to who he is when his belt and shoelaces are gone. The county holding cell was a throat that never swallowed, just held and held and held. A kid with a spiderweb tattoo asked me for a cigarette I didn't have, then laughed when I said I didn't smoke. "You do now," he said, and the laugh rattled in my bones. When they called my name, Whitmore, I stood and my knees knocked like strangers. In the narrow hallway, my breath sounded too loud. Daylight from the high window slashed my eyes, and I remembered the sticker Becky had pressed into my palm. It wasn't there anymore. Arraignment felt like a stage play I hadn't auditioned for. The courtroom smelled like polished wood and sour coffee. Judge Harold Pierce peered over his glasses as if I were a smudge on the lens. District Attorney Charles Hendricks grinned the way men grin when they've already measured the box. My lawyer, Public Defender Alan Brooks, shook my hand without looking at my face. "We'll sort it," he whispered, breath minty and tired. "We always do." Sarah wasn't in the benches. Pastor John Everett was, hat between his hands, lips moving on a prayer I hoped had my name in it. "No bail?" Hendricks asked, voice buttery, given the brutality of the crime. "No priors," Brooks countered, flipping a file as if it could blow a miracle into the judge's lap. The judge's gavel tapped once like a little coffin lid. "Remanded," he said. I felt the word settle on me like wet wool. Hendricks slid a thin packet to Brooks. "Discovery," he said, a cat laying a mouse on a rug. In the side room after, with a buzzing Coke machine and a dripping ceiling tile, Brooks leafed through papers the way a man checks a bill he already knows he can't pay. "They got your wrench," he said. "And a witness." "Who?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "We'll fight it," he said, which was not an answer. "Who?" I said again, the word now a shiver. Brooks pinched the bridge of his nose. He slid the witness list across the metal table with 2 fingers, as if it might burn. "Top of the list," he said softly, "is someone the jury will believe." My eyes fell on the name, and for a second I couldn't read. Letters refused to stay still. Then they did. Ethan Whitmore. My brother. The boy who once split a jelly sandwich with me on a playground bench and said we were a team. The man who borrowed my tools and never brought them back. I heard myself laugh, a dry, broken bark that didn't belong to me. "No," I said, even though the ink was there, square and black and sure. Brooks touched my sleeve in a gesture that wanted to be comfort. "He says he saw you," he murmured. The Coke machine rattled to life behind us, coughing coins as if the room itself were paying out on a bet against me. "He says he saw you go in after closing." My mouth opened, but the words didn't come. What came instead was the image of Ethan's eyes across a witness stand, calm, rehearsed, ready, and the sound of a door in my life swinging shut on a hinge I'd never noticed until it locked. Before the sirens, before the photographs, before my name became a headline, there was just life. Grease under my nails, radio static, the soft clang of tools on concrete. My garage sat on the corner of Linden and Hartwell, a squat brick box with a fading sign, Whitmore Auto Repair, honest work, since '72. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The days ran on rhythm. Engines in, engines out, sandwiches from Peterson's deli next door, and Sarah dropping by around noon with Becky in her little yellow coat. Sometimes on cold mornings, I'd see Ethan leaning on the doorframe, nursing a cigarette he couldn't afford. He'd smile, that thin, lopsided grin that always looked like he was hiding something behind it. Ethan had once been the golden boy. Our father, David Sr., made sure of that. Ethan could crash a car and somehow be called adventurous. I could fix that same car and be called useful. Our mother, Margaret, tried to keep peace between us, the kind of woman who'd bake 2 pies just to make sure neither of us felt like the favorite. When she died, it was Ethan who read the eulogy, and me who fixed the loose door on her coffin lid before the service. That was us in a nutshell. Him with the words, me with the wrench. I remember one night, Not long before Arthur Bellamy's death, Ethan came by the shop after closing. The fluorescent lights hummed over our heads, and his boots left little crescents of mud across my clean floor. "Need a favor," he said. I was wiping my hands, same as always. "You always do," he laughed. "You got that pickup still?" "Yeah," I said slowly. "Why?" He told me he had a job moving equipment for a buddy out in Newark. Said it'd pay good. Said he'd bring it back full of gas. I knew that tone. The one he used when he was halfway lying but didn't want to say which half. I should have said no. But blood is a stubborn currency. I tossed him the keys and said, "Be careful." He winked and said, "Always am." He wasn't. He never was. That night I dreamed of our mother again, her voice calling from the kitchen, that old clock ticking on the wall, the way she'd say, "Look after your brother. Danny, he doesn't see the holes he digs." I woke before dawn, heart tight, the taste of engine oil still on my tongue. The next morning, Ethan showed up late, truck spattered with something that wasn't quite mud. He handed me the keys and said, "Worked out fine." I asked him if the job paid well. He smiled without teeth. "You could say that." Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a wad of cash, thick wrong. "Got something for you," he said, peeling off a few bills. I pushed his hand away. "I don't want your money." He shrugged, stuffed it back into his pocket and said, "Suit yourself, I didn't know what to make of it." I'd spent my life believing Ethan was reckless but not cruel. That belief cracked a little that morning. Still, when he asked if he could borrow my wrench set, the same set later found under Arthur's body, I handed it to him without a second thought. Family, I told myself. Family doesn't need proof. Sarah never trusted him. She'd smile politely when he visited, but afterward she'd always say, "He's got eyes that don't land anywhere." I'd laugh it off, kiss her forehead, tell her she watched too many crime shows. But she was right. Ethan's eyes were always somewhere else, darting, calculating. There was one Sunday dinner at our house that sticks with me. Sarah had made pot roast. Becky was playing with mashed potatoes like they were clay, and Ethan was telling one of his stories, something about a poker game in Cincinnati. When he reached for the salt, I saw a bruise blooming under his sleeve. "What happened?" I asked. "Lost a bet," he said, grinning. Sarah frowned. Becky giggled, not knowing why. It was a normal night, mostly. Until Ethan said, quiet enough for only me to hear, "You ever think about how easy it'd be to switch places with someone? Just step into their life for a bit?" I laughed awkwardly. "Not really." He nodded slowly, fork scraping the plate. "You should." A week later, the town buzzed about Arthur Bellamy, how his market was struggling, how someone had been spotted arguing with him behind the store after closing. I didn't think much of it then. Arthur was a kind man but proud, and half the neighborhood owed him money. I was fixing Mrs. Collins's Buick that evening, radio humming low, when I saw Ethan's pickup flash by outside the shop window. Fast, too fast. Headlights carving through the fog like knives. That was the last time I saw him before the police came, the night before my arrest. I sat on the couch with Sarah and Becky. The TV played softly, some rerun where the laugh track sounded too bright. Sarah rested her head on my shoulder. Becky fell asleep between us, her small hand curled around my finger. I remember thinking, I am lucky. I remember feeling a peace so solid I could have built a house on it. Then the phone rang. Sarah reached for it, half asleep. "Danny," she said after a moment, voice uncertain. "It's Ethan." I took the phone. "Hey, brother." His voice was strange, slow, thick, like he was underwater. "You home?" "Yeah, why?" "Just wanted to make sure." I heard something in the background, a siren maybe, or a TV turned up too loud. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Never better," he said, then hung up. I stood there, receiver warm against my ear, the dial tone bleeding into the room. Sarah looked up, confused. "What's wrong?" she asked. I shook my head. "Nothing," I lied. "Just Ethan being Ethan. I couldn't have known that was the call before the storm, that somewhere out there, my brother was already building the story that would bury me." When I finally went to bed that night, I placed Becky's sticker on my nightstand, the one she'd given me for luck. Her pink heart, a little off-center. By morning it had lost its stick. It just lay there, useless, silent, and waiting. The courthouse smelled like old paper and rain, that kind of damp that seeps through your shoes and into your bones. I remember every echo in that place, every cough, every shuffle of feet against tile. They led me in through a side door, wrists chained, as if I were something wild that had to be kept from breaking the glass. Sarah was there. She sat in the second row, her hands folded so tight her knuckles were pale. Becky wasn't. She was too young to see her father like that. Thank God. But I saw Pastor Everett, hat pressed to his chest, lips moving like he was whispering to someone who might still listen. The prosecutor, Charles Hendricks, was all slick hair and confidence. A man who looked like he'd been waiting for this exact kind of case to make a name for himself. People versus Daniel Whitmore, he said, as if I were an idea, not a man. My lawyer, Alan Brooks, leaned close to me and murmured, "We'll fight the testimony." "That's our best shot." I asked, "What testimony?" He didn't answer, just stared at his notes, avoiding my eyes. When they brought Ethan in, I thought I'd imagined it at first. My brother in a pressed shirt, clean-shaven, standing there like a stranger wearing his face. He avoided looking at me. Hendricks called him Mr. Whitmore and asked him to describe what he'd seen. "I was driving past Bellamy's Market," Ethan began, voice low, deliberate, each word sharp as glass. "It was late, maybe 10:30. I saw Danny's truck parked out front. Lights were off inside. Then I saw him go in." A murmur spread through the courtroom. My heart thudded in my chest like it was trying to climb out. Hendricks nodded, encouraging him. "You're sure it was your brother?" Ethan hesitated, just enough to make it look painful, believable. "Yes," he said finally. "I saw him." The room tilted. For a second, all I could hear was the sound of the ceiling fan, its slow, tired rhythm. Alan whispered, "Don't react," but I did. I turned toward Ethan. "You know that's not true," I said, my voice raw. Judge Pierce slammed the gavel. "Mr. Whitmore, you'll remain silent." The bailiff's hand tightened on my shoulder. Ethan's eyes flicked toward me then, only for a moment, and what I saw there wasn't guilt. It was calculation. He'd practiced this, rehearsed it. He wasn't breaking, not even blinking. When the trial resumed the next day, Hendricks built his mountain of evidence one grain at a time. The wrench with my initials, the fingerprint, the missing deposit bag. Carla Hughes testified about finding my prints and the tool under Arthur's body. She didn't look at me either. Maybe she couldn't. Alan tried, God help him. He cross-examined, asked if there'd been signs of forced entry, if there were other fingerprints, other DNA. The answers came back like small bullets. No, none, just his. He brought up that half the town borrowed my tools, that I'd fixed Arthur's machines for years, that the prints proved nothing but familiarity. Hendricks smirked as if familiarity were guilt. Then he called Sarah. I didn't want her to testify. She looked fragile under those fluorescent lights, a ghost version of the woman I'd kissed goodbye that morning. Hendricks was smooth, polite, pretending sympathy. "Mrs. Whitmore," he began, "was your husband home the night of June 3rd? Sarah's voice trembled. "Yes, he was with me and our daughter. All evening?" "Yes." "And yet," he said, holding up the phone records, "there was a call from your brother-in-law at 9:56 p.m. Do you recall that?" She nodded. "I do. Did your husband leave the house after that call?" Sarah's mouth opened, but no words came. Hendricks waited, patient as a vulture. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know. I fell asleep. The silence afterward was brutal. I could feel the jury shift, that subtle collective lean of belief turning against me. I wanted to shout that I hadn't left, that I'd been right there, Becky asleep on my lap, the movie still running. But the gavel would have silenced me again, and besides, no one wanted the truth, just a version of it they could stamp with a verdict. When they dismissed Sarah, she didn't look back. Maybe she couldn't bear to. Maybe she already thought I was gone. The verdict came on a Tuesday morning that smelled of rain and exhaust. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, neighbors, strangers who just wanted a story. Hendricks read from his notes like he was narrating the end of a play. The people find the defendant, Daniel Whitmore, guilty of murder in the 2nd degree. The words didn't hit all at once. They spread slow like ink through paper. I looked at Ethan. He sat there, expression blank, hands folded neatly in his lap. For a moment I thought I saw something flicker behind his eyes. Not regret, not relief, but something emptier. Sarah sobbed once, sharp, involuntary. Becky wasn't there, thank God. The bailiff pulled my arms behind me, cold metal closing again around my wrists. Hendricks was already shaking hands. his smile bright for the cameras. I remember hearing a woman whisper in the gallery, "Such a shame. He seemed like a good man." They led me out a side door, my feet heavy, the cuffs biting into my skin. As we passed the hallway window, I caught sight of Ethan outside on the courthouse steps. Reporters swarmed him, microphones flashing like lightning. He looked calm, even noble. Someone handed him a tissue. He dabbed his eyes for the cameras, and in that instant, that tiny, suspended heartbeat of time, I understood what my mother meant when she warned me, "Your brother doesn't see the holes he digs." Because this hole he'd made, it wasn't just for me. It was for both of us. He just hadn't realized yet that one day he'd fall into it too. The first thing I noticed was the noise. It wasn't shouting or fighting like you see in movies. Not yet. It was the hum. A constant living hum that came from everywhere and nowhere. From the flickering lights, the clanging pipes, the buzz of electric locks, the low murmur of men trying not to remember they were human. When the van door opened, the air hit me, thick, sour, metallic. The smell of sweat and disinfectant, of fear baked into concrete. A guard shoved me forward. "Welcome home," he said, voice flat as a shovel blade. They marched us through corridors that seemed to fold in on themselves. Each gate opened with a heavy groan, then slammed shut like it was sealing away a secret. I kept my eyes forward, but it was impossible not to see. Faces behind bars, eyes following, words whispered through the cracks. One man hissed, "Fresh meat." Another laughed low, a sound like a saw cutting through bone. My cell was at the end of Block C, the paint peeled like old skin. One bed, one toilet, one sink that coughed brown water. The mattress was thin as regret. On the wall someone had carved a name, Terry B. 1978-1983. And underneath it, 2 words, "Still here." I sat on the bed and felt the years waiting for me, stacked like stones. That night the warden, Frank Dempsey, walked through. Big man, slow steps, eyes that saw too much. "New one," he said to the guard. "Whitmore." He looked at me for a long time. "So you the mechanic?" I nodded. "Then you'll fit right in. Everything here's broken." He walked off, boots echoing down the hall. When lights went out, the prison didn't sleep. Metal whispered. Men muttered prayers. Someone cried softly into the dark. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling where shadows moved like ghosts. My mind replayed the trial, Ethan's voice, Sarah's trembling hands. I tried to breathe, but it felt like the walls were breathing back, slow, heavy, patient. Like they were alive, waiting for me to stop fighting. Days blurred. Morning was just a word. Breakfast tasted like cardboard and soap. The guards barked orders that didn't need reasons. I learned the rhythms: line up, eat, work, count, repeat. The yard was grey gravel under grey sky. Men walked in circles, heads down, eyes measuring. No one smiled. That's where I met Luis Herrera, my first cellmate. Small guy, early 40s, eyes calm but deep. "They say you killed somebody," he said, not as an accusation, just a fact. "They say a lot," I answered. He nodded. "Me too." But I didn't. I looked at him, waiting for the punchline. It never came. He just sat on his bunk, fixing the strap on his worn Bible. "You believe in God?" he asked. "Not lately," I said. "That's okay," he replied. "He still believes in you." We became silent allies. He showed me how to survive. Never owe favors, never look too long at another man's scars, never eat the cornbread on Thursdays. "They mix the old grease in," he said with a wink. Sometimes late at night we talked about the world outside. His daughter Sophia, my little Becky. "They grow up," Louis said, staring at the dark ceiling. "Even if you're not there, they just grow away." One afternoon in the yard, a man called Red McKinley decided I owed him respect. Big guy, arms like bridge cables, tattoos crawling up his neck. "You Whitmore?" he said. I nodded. "Are you the one killed that store guy?" "No." He grinned, showing 2 gold teeth. "Then you're stupid and unlucky." He swung without warning. Fist to the jaw, hot flash of light. I hit the ground hard, gravel biting into my cheek. The guards didn't move. No one ever did. I heard Louis shouting, felt another kick, then boots stomping away. That night he helped clean the blood from my lip. "You fight back next time," he said. "If you don't, you'll keep bleeding." I told him I wasn't a fighter. He looked at me with pity. "You are now." Months passed. The seasons outside changed, but in here time didn't. Winter was just cold concrete, summer just hotter concrete. Letters came less often. Sarah's handwriting started small, then stopped altogether. One day Pastor Everett wrote instead, "She's trying to protect Becky. She needs space." Space. As if miles could hide what prison makes of a man. Luis was transferred after a year. "You'll be okay," he said, gripping my shoulder. "Just don't forget who you were." When he left, the cell felt like a tomb with the door half open. Red found me again in the laundry room. "Heard your wife's done with you," he said. "Guess she's smarter than you." I hit him then once hard without thinking. He staggered, laughed, blood on his teeth. "That's more like it," he said. "Welcome to the family." That night, lying on the cold bunk, my knuckles throbbing, I realized something awful. I was changing. The quiet man who fixed cars and kissed his daughter good night was fading. What remained was something harder, sharper. Not evil, just empty. When the lights flickered and the walls groaned, I whispered Ethan's name just once. It echoed off the concrete and came back smaller, weaker. In here, even your own voice learns not to trust you. The first letter I ever wrote from prison smelled like ink and fear. I didn't know how to begin it. Dear Sarah felt too formal, my love too fragile for a place where love was a rumor. I ended up writing, "I'm still me." 3 words, nothing more. I told her about Luis, about the yard, about how I kept her picture folded in the Bible he left behind. I told her I dreamed of Becky running through our backyard, grass stuck to her socks, hair full of sunlight. I told her to tell Becky her daddy loved her. I mailed that letter in March. By June, there was no reply. I wrote again, then again. The mailroom clerk, an old woman named Patty Collins, who smelled faintly of antiseptic and rose lotion, said, "Sometimes it takes a while." I nodded, pretending that a while meant weeks, not eternity. Months went by. The other men got letters. Girlfriends, mothers, brothers who still believed in redemption. Every mail call I waited, hands sweating against the metal bench. The guard would read names. McKinley, Harris, Porter. Never mind. Sometimes I'd close my eyes and imagine her handwriting. The loops in her Y, the tiny heart she used to dot her I. I began to wonder if maybe I'd forgotten how to see it. One day, a guard tossed a torn envelope through the cell bars. "Whitmore!" he barked. I caught it mid-air. My heart stuttered when I saw her name. Sarah Whitmore. Return address, our old street. My hands shook so bad I could barely open it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. 2 sentences. "Danny, I can't do this anymore. Becky needs stability. Please don't write again." I read it once, then again. The words didn't sink in right away. They floated above me like steam. Luis's old Bible sat on the shelf beside my bunk. I tore the page from the back and slipped Sarah's letter there. Maybe God needed proof that love could rot too. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to Red snore 2 cells down, the radiator hiss, the drip, drip, drip from a leaking pipe. Every sound felt like a clock counting something I'd already lost. When morning came, I wrote one last letter. Just her name, and a line beneath it. Nothing else. Years crawled. The edges of memory dulled like worn metal. Patty Collins would sometimes slide me a newspaper clipping when no one was looking. "Just so you know the world's still turning," she'd say. One headline: "Local teacher wins district award. Sarah Whitmore honored for excellence." I stared at that picture until the ink smeared on my fingers. Her hair shorter now, streaked with grey. Becky standing beside her, maybe 12, taller, smiling. No trace of me in that smile. I didn't hate her. I tried, but I couldn't. I understood. Life moves on, even when we're trapped in concrete. One winter a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a child's drawing. Stick figures, a blue sky, a sun with uneven rays. 3 people. The tallest one crossed out in red crayon. I knew that handwriting. Becky's. I kept it under my mattress, like a relic from a world that no longer believed in me. Sometimes, when I'd be working in the prison workshop fixing broken fans, I'd think about the small things. The hum of the washing machine back home. The squeak of Becky's tricycle. Sarah humming along to the radio while making dinner. I'd cling to those sounds because they reminded me that somewhere out there I had once been real. But memory is a cruel companion. It doesn't let you rest. It just keeps whispering what used to be, until you start to hate remembering at all. The day the divorce papers came, I didn't open them. Patty handed me the envelope, her eyes soft with pity. "You sure?" she asked. I nodded. I don't need to read it to know what it says. That night, I burned it in the metal trash barrel in the yard. The paper curled, blackened, and disappeared into the dark like a ghost. I watched until there was nothing left but grey flakes, then rubbed the ashes between my fingers. They felt like sand, like something too fine to ever rebuild. Afterward, I sat in the chapel, empty except for the hum of the lights. I looked at the cross above the altar and whispered, I forgive her. It sounded strange, like someone else's voice. Maybe it was. When I got back to my cell, Red was waiting. Mail day treat, huh? He sneered. I didn't answer. He laughed. Guess even your woman knows better. I turned away. But his words followed me all night. By dawn, I realized the cruelest thing about prison wasn't the walls or the locks. It was knowing the world didn't stop without you. It kept spinning, bright and loud and full of people who forgot your name. The next morning, I carved mine into the wall beneath Terry B's old scratch marks. Just Danny W., nothing else. Because names at least don't stop existing when love does. Time stopped being something I could count. It wasn't days or weeks anymore. It was just light and dark. The clanging of metal doors, the endless echo of footsteps on concrete. I used to keep track by marking lines on the wall, one for each week. After a while, the wall looked like it was bleeding chalk. I stopped. It didn't matter. The faces around me changed. New men came in, old ones left in chains or body bags. Red McKinley was still there, older, slower, but still mean. Sometimes he'd nod at me in the yard, a sign of respect forged in violence. I didn't nod back. Respect didn't mean much when you were both buried alive. I got assigned to maintenance full-time, fixing broken locks, rewiring lights, patching leaks. Funny how a man can spend his life repairing things he never broke. The guards liked me for it. Whitmore, you got hands, they'd say. Make yourself useful. So I did. I became the ghost that kept the place running. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in a cracked mirror, hair gone grey, eyes dull, lines deep around my mouth. I'd stare until the reflection felt like someone else entirely. Someone older than the walls. Nurse Patty still worked in the infirmary. She'd stop me sometimes when I passed by. You holding up, Danny? She'd ask. I'd shrug. Depends what up means. She'd give me that small, sad smile. Still writing? I shook my head. No one left to read. She'd pat my arm gently. Write anyway. Sometimes God reads. Nights were hardest. I'd lie awake listening to men snore, cry, whisper. I'd think about Sarah's letter, about Becky's drawing. I'd wonder if Becky had kids now. If she told them their grandfather was dead or worse, still alive but forgotten. Sometimes in dreams, I'd see her as a little girl again, running down our hallway with bare feet and laughter like sunlight. I'd wake up gasping, that sound echoing in my head long after the dream faded. After 20 years, prison became routine. I could walk from my cell to the cafeteria blindfolded. I knew which guards would steal from commissary, which inmates could be trusted with a cigarette, which days the warden would check the yard. I became invisible in a place built to erase men. Then one morning, a rumor rippled through the block, new evidence in someone's case. It wasn't mine, but for a moment my heart stirred like an old engine trying to start. Maybe someday, I thought. Maybe someone will see what Ethan did. But then the noise of the yard swallowed that thought whole, like it swallowed everything else. The warden, Dempsey, retired that year. He stopped by the workshop before he left. You kept this place breathing, Whitmore, he said. Wish I could do something for you. I smiled faintly. You already did, I said. You left. He laughed, a rough sound, then shook my hand. You're all right, son. Don't die here if you can help it. That night I lay awake replaying those words. Don't die here. It sounded like a prayer and a warning all at once. I made myself a promise. If I ever got the chance to breathe free air again, I'd remember what it tasted like, even if it was just for a day. By the time I turned 60, the world outside had turned into science fiction. The guards carried tablets instead of clipboards. Some of the younger inmates had tattoos of things I didn't recognize, logos, memes, strange symbols. They called me Old Man Whitmore. I didn't correct them. One winter morning, while fixing a busted heater in the chapel, I found something wedged behind the altar, a tiny folded piece of paper, yellow with age. I unfolded it carefully. It was a prayer list. 10 names. One of them, mine. Written in neat looping script, Daniel Whitmore, for truth and peace. No one knew who'd written it. Maybe Patty, maybe a chaplain long gone. I stared at that paper for a long time, my hands trembling. Someone, somewhere, had remembered me. That night I tucked the note inside Louise's old Bible and whispered a prayer I barely remembered how to say. Not for freedom. Not anymore. Just for peace. The kind that comes when you stop fighting the years. I didn't know it yet, but the world outside was finally starting to turn toward me again. Somewhere far from those walls, Ethan Whitmore was waking up to his own prison. The one he built. The one that was closing in on him. And time, which had forgotten me for so long, was about to remember my name. It was an ordinary Tuesday when everything started to tilt again. I was sweeping the workshop floor. Slow, deliberate, watching the dust spiral in weak rays of light. Routine. That's how you survive in prison. You live inside repetition until it becomes a kind of numb prayer. The mail cart rolled by, pushed by a young guard named Miller, who still believed this place was about justice. "Whitmore," he said, tossing an envelope onto my workbench. I didn't even look at first. Probably another church pamphlet or notice about commissary changes. But then I saw the handwriting. Neat, deliberate, not printed, written. The return address read Marjorie Kane, retired detective, Columbus PD. I froze. My throat went dry. My name looked foreign in her script. Mr. Daniel Whitmore. I wiped my hands on my jumpsuit, sat down on the edge of the bench and opened it. Inside were just 3 sentences. Mr. Whitmore, I recently reviewed evidence from the Bellamy case while consulting for an internal audit. There are inconsistencies in your brother's statement that were never investigated. If you're willing to talk, write back. No signature flourish, no apology. Just facts and a promise buried between them. My fingers trembled. The paper smelled faintly of dust and perfume, the scent of a world that still had sunlight. I sat there for a long time, staring at the words. The workshop clock ticked so loud it felt like it was mocking me. Then I folded the letter neatly and slipped it inside Louise's old Bible, right next to the prayer list with my name. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the block, footsteps, metal, whispers, sounded like it was spelling her name, Kane, Kane, Kane. Hope is dangerous in a place like this. It can lift you up just enough to make the fall lethal. But for the first time in decades, I felt something alive inside me. It scared me almost as much as it comforted me. A week later, I sat in the mailroom with a stub of a pencil, writing my reply on government-issued paper. My hands shook the whole time. "Detective Kane," I wrote, "thank you for reaching out. I have nothing left but the truth. If you can find it, I'll talk." Patty Collins, still running the mail counter, looked at the envelope before stamping it. "Who's that?" she asked softly. "An old ghost," I said. "Maybe one that remembers me." She smiled the way people do when they want to believe something good might happen. "Then send it," she whispered. Maybe the ghost has work to do. 3 weeks later, her response came. This time longer. She'd been part of a cold case review team, found missing lab notes, an evidence log that didn't match court records. "Your brother claimed you confessed to him the night before the murder," she wrote. "But there's no recording, no transcript, nothing. Just his statement. I read that line over and over until it blurred. I never confessed anything. I never even saw Ethan that night. Not after that strange phone call." My hands curled into fists so tight my nails left half moons in my palms. That evening, I walked the yard under a bruised sky. The air smelled of rain and iron. Red McKinley limped beside me, older now, slower. "You look different, old man," he said. "Like someone woke you up." I nodded. "Maybe they did," he grunted. "Careful. Waking up in here hurts worse than sleeping." He wasn't wrong, Detective Kane kept writing. Her next letter mentioned a missing file, one that listed Arthur Bellamy's debts, including a loan tied to Ethan Whitmore. The words punched through me like a blunt knife. Ethan had owed Arthur money. Big money. I couldn't breathe reading that. All those years, and it was right there. The motive no one ever looked at. The truth buried under signatures and neglect. Kane was retired, but she still had contacts. She told me she was going to meet with the current DA's office, try to access the sealed evidence. "No promises," she wrote, "but I'm not done." The next week, Patty called me to the infirmary. "Oh, you've got a visitor," she said. her voice trembling slightly. Not on the list, but she pulled some strings. I walked into that small grey room and froze. There she was, Detective Marjorie Kane. Older than I expected, hair silver, eyes sharp as glass. She extended her hand through the plastic barrier. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, calm, steady, "it's time we fix what your brother broke." My throat closed. Words wouldn't come. I managed to nod. "I can't promise freedom," she said, leaning forward, "but I can promise I'll get to the truth, even if it's ugly." I swallowed hard. "Ugly," I said, voice cracking, "is all that's left." She nodded slowly, like she understood. And when she walked away, the door shutting softly behind her, I realized something terrifying. Hope wasn't a miracle. It was a burden, but it was one I was finally willing to carry again. The letter came on a Monday morning that smelled like bleach and rain. Patty slid it under my cell door before breakfast, whispering, "From Kane." I unfolded it with hands that didn't feel like mine. The handwriting was rushed this time, uneven. "Daniel, your brother suffered a major stroke 2 nights ago. He's in St. Mary's Hospital, Columbus." His attending physician, Dr. Alan Pierce, reached out. "Ethan asked for your daughter. He's talking, he's saying things. Stay steady. I'll contact the DA once I confirm everything. M. Kane." I sat on the edge of my bunk, reading the words until they stopped meaning anything. Ethan, stroke, confession. The air in the cell thickened, the walls closing in. For years I'd imagined this moment, him breaking, telling the truth, setting me free. But the idea of it actually happening felt unreal, like someone else's story. That night I didn't sleep. I listened to the rain batter the window slits and thought about all the nights I'd cursed his name. I wanted to hate him. God knows I tried. But now, knowing he was lying somewhere between life and death, my anger twisted into something heavier. Pity, maybe even love, the old, broken kind that never really dies. In the morning, Patty brought coffee to the maintenance room. "You heard about your brother?" she asked gently. "Yeah, you okay?" she said. I didn't know how to answer. I just said no, but maybe that's finally okay too. 2 days later, a message came from Kane. She'd spoken to Dr. Alan Pierce. Ethan had regained partial speech. His right side was paralyzed, his voice slurred, but he was lucid. He'd asked to see Becky, and then, in front of the doctor and later a nurse, he said my name. Over and over, Kane relayed Pierce's report word for word. It wasn't Danny, it was me. I needed the money. I thought he'd forgive me. Tell him, "I'm sorry." The words hit like thunder after a lifetime of silence. 35 years of hate, erased in 3 broken sentences. I pressed the paper to my chest, trying to breathe. The room spun. Louise's Bible fell open on the floor, pages fluttering like wings. Later that week, Kane visited again. Through the glass, she said, "It's on record now. Dr. Pierce and a nurse signed the statement. We have a shot." I nodded slowly. "He finally told the truth," I whispered. Kane's eyes softened. He did, but I could see something in her face, hesitation. I asked, "What's wrong?" She exhaled. "The DA doesn't want to reopen. Says it's too old, too many files missing. They want Ethan to testify on camera, make it official." I swallowed hard. "Can he?" She looked down. "He's fading fast." Weeks blurred into a cruel waiting. I prayed for the first time in years, not for myself, but for Ethan to hold on long enough to finish what he started. Then one night, near midnight, Patty knocked softly on my cell. "Call from Kane," she whispered. My hands shook as I picked up the receiver in the tiny office. Kane's voice was rough. "Daniel." "He's gone." The world froze. For a long moment I couldn't breathe. "He died about an hour ago," she said. "But listen, before he went, he called your daughter by name. Becky recorded everything. The confession's on tape. The doctor witnessed it too." My knees buckled. I gripped the counter, tears I didn't know I still had stinging my eyes. Kane's voice softened. "It's enough, Daniel." "Maybe finally enough," I managed to whisper. "He waited until he had nothing left to lose. He waited until he could live with himself," she said. When the line went silent, I just stood there, a man older than his years in a place that had stolen my life. And for the first time in decades, I felt something lift inside me. Not joy, not peace, just a weight shifting slightly, like the world had tilted a fraction closer to right. Back in my cell, I took out Ethan's last letter, the one I'd never written. but always imagined. I whispered into the dark, "I forgive you, brother, but I can't forget." The rain outside softened to a steady rhythm, and for the first time since 1989, I fell asleep without counting the hours. The morning after Ethan's death, the prison felt different. Not quieter. Nothing here was ever truly quiet, but slower, like the air itself was holding its breath. Patty came to my cell at dawn, a manila envelope in her hands. "From Kane," she said softly. "Says it's time." Inside was a notarized transcript of Ethan's confession, signed by Dr. Alan Pierce and the attending nurse. Kane had written a short note clipped to it. "This is the start, not the end. Hold on." I sat on my bunk, tracing my brother's name at the bottom of the page. His signature was shaky, barely legible, but it was there. After 35 years of silence, the truth had finally written itself down. That afternoon, the warden called me to his office. A new man now. Warden Keller, younger, clean-shaven, no nonsense. "Whitmore," he said, folding his hands. "Detective Kane contacted the Board of Appeals. They're reviewing your case." My stomach clenched. "So what does that mean?" "It means maybe," he said. "Maybe we open the door again." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I've seen hundreds of men claim innocence." "You never did, you just waited." He paused. "Maybe that's what made them listen." I walked back to my cell in a haze. The inmates whispered as I passed. Red McKinley called out, "Old man, they say you're getting out." I stopped, turned toward him. "We'll see," he laughed, shaking his head. "Hell, maybe there is a God." That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Hope, real hope this time, wasn't soft or warm. It was sharp, cutting, dangerous. It reminded me I still had something left to lose. A month later, Detective Kane came in person. She looked exhausted but determined, carrying a briefcase stuffed with papers. "The DA fought it," she said, "but the judge overruled. We're reopening the case under post-conviction review." My hands trembled. "So they'll hear it?" "They'll hear it," she said. "And they'll have to listen this time." She spread the papers across the glass divider. Evidence logs, new affidavits, Ethan's confession, bank statements linking him to Arthur Bellamy's missing deposits. He borrowed from Bellamy thousands. When Bellamy demanded repayment, Ethan panicked. "You know the rest." I nodded slowly, every muscle tight. "He let me rot so he could sleep." Kane's eyes softened. "He couldn't sleep, Daniel. Not for decades. That's why he broke." She gathered the files. "We'll file the motion next week. It'll take time. Bureaucracy always does. But we're close." As she stood to leave, she placed her hand on the glass. "Be ready," she said. "Freedom doesn't feel the way you remember." I watched her walk away, the echo of her heels fading into the long corridor. Freedom. The word didn't fit in my mouth anymore. 3 months later, the retrial hearing was scheduled. Kane testified by video. Dr. Pierce appeared in person, calm and steady, recounting Ethan's final words. The courtroom, the same one where I'd once been condemned, felt smaller now, or maybe I was larger. When the judge asked if I had anything to say, I stood. My voice shook, but I found the words. "I've been called many things in this room. Murderer, liar, waste of life. I believed for a long time that silence was my only way to survive. But silence almost killed me. My brother took my life once. This system kept it. The judge didn't look away. He just nodded, slow and heavy. After closing statements, they recessed. I sat in that echoing chamber, hands folded, feeling the weight of 3.5 decades pressing down on my shoulders. Kane squeezed my arm as she passed. "No matter what happens," she whispered, "we made them see you." The next morning I was back in my cell when the warden came down the block himself, a folded paper in hand. "Whitmore," he called. His voice cracked a little. I stood, heart pounding. He handed me the document. "The conviction's vacated," he said. "You're going home." The words hung in the air like smoke. I wanted to fall, to shout, to laugh, but I just stood there, staring at the seal at the bottom of the page. After 35 years, justice hadn't run. It had crawled. But it had come. That night I packed everything I owned into a small cardboard box, a Bible, a folded prayer, a drawing of 3 stick figures, and the letter that started it all. When the lights went out, I sat awake until dawn, afraid that if I closed my eyes, morning would change its mind. The morning I was released, the sun looked different. Too bright, too clean. After 35 years of filtered light through steel mesh, The real thing hurt my eyes. Warden Keller walked me to the gate himself. "Paperwork's done," he said, handing me a thin envelope. "Bus ticket, some cash, clothes in the bag." He hesitated, then added, "You did your time, Whitmore, even if you never should have." The last door buzzed open. That sound, sharp electric final, was the sound of a world I no longer belonged to. I stepped through and the gate slammed shut behind me. The air hit me like cold water. My lungs expanded too fast, and I had to lean against the fence just to breathe. Outside the prison, a few reporters waited, cameras ready, faces expectant. "Mr. Whitmore, how does it feel to be free?" one shouted. I wanted to tell them freedom isn't a feeling, it's a question. Instead, I just said, "Strange." They kept shouting, but I walked past them, clutching my paper bag, heart hammering. At the end of the parking lot stood a woman holding a single sunflower. Becky. For a moment, I didn't recognize her. She was grown now, 40, maybe 41. Her hair, like her mother's, streaked with silver. The sunflower trembled in her hand. "Dad," she said softly. My throat closed. I took a step closer, afraid she'd disappear if I blinked. Becky. The name barely made it out. She dropped the flower and ran to me. Her arms wrapped around my shoulders, tight and shaking. I hadn't been held in 35 years. I forgot what it felt like. I cried into her hair, my tears mixing with hers. She whispered, "He told me before he died, Dad. I'm so sorry." I pulled back to look at her face, her mother's eyes, my jaw. "You don't owe me sorry," I said. "You believed what you were told." We all did. Behind her, Detective Kane stood by her car, watching quietly. She gave a small nod. I nodded back. The air smelled like asphalt, gasoline, and grass after rain. Freedom. But it didn't taste sweet. It tasted like rust. Like the world had kept moving without me, and I was just catching the echo. Becky drove. I sat in the passenger seat of a car that hummed quietly, screens on the dashboard glowing with colors I didn't recognize. "You okay?" she asked every few miles. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what okay meant anymore. We passed the city limits. Columbus had changed. Buildings taller, streets wider, everything faster. Billboards flashed like lightning. "Feels like another planet," I murmured. Becky smiled sadly. "It kind of is." She pulled onto a quiet road lined with oaks and small houses. "Mom's place," she said softly. My heart stumbled. Sarah. I hadn't said her name out loud in decades. When we pulled into the driveway, I almost didn't get out. The house looked smaller, but the porch light was the same yellow glow I remembered. Sarah stepped out onto the porch. Time had bent her, but not broken her. Grey hair pulled back, cardigan wrapped tight, eyes cautious. "Hello, Danny," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, like she'd practiced the words 1,000 times. "Hi, Sarah." We stood there, a yard's length apart, years of silence hanging between us. Becky hovered near the steps, her eyes wet. Sarah finally said, "You look older." I laughed quietly. "You look better than I deserve to see." She came closer, hesitant. "I kept your wrench set," she said. Couldn't bring myself to throw it away. That hit harder than I expected. I swallowed. That's more than most people kept. We sat on the porch for hours, saying little. She told me about her teaching, about Becky's wedding, about life continuing. I listened, each word like a ghost walking through my chest. When the sun dipped, she said, "I'm sorry I believed him." I shook my head. "Don't be!" I believed him too. That night, Becky dropped me off at a small apartment Detective Kane had arranged. A cot, a table, a window that actually opened. "Call me if you need anything," Becky said, her hand on my arm. "I will," I promised. When she left, I sat by the window and watched headlights slide across the wall. The world outside hummed, alive and indifferent. I opened the small bag they'd given me. A Bible, my release papers, and Ethan's confession. The only thing I had that proved I'd ever been wronged. I unfolded it and read his trembling words again. It wasn't Danny. It was me, I whispered into the empty room. "You finally told the truth, brother. But you should have done it when it still mattered." The street outside was quiet. Somewhere a siren wailed in the distance. I closed my eyes and listened, breathing deep. Freedom was louder than I remembered. The house stood at the end of Maple Street, quiet and sunken into itself, like it had been holding its breath for decades. Becky parked the car and turned off the engine. The ticking of the cooling motor filled the silence. You sure about this, Dad? She asked. I wasn't, not even close. But I nodded anyway. Yeah, the front porch sagged a little. The railing was gone, the paint peeled to grey. I touched the doorframe as we stepped up, the same one I'd painted blue the summer before it all fell apart. My fingerprints might have still been in the wood somewhere, buried under years of dust. The door creaked open. The smell hit me first. Not the sweet mix of coffee and Sarah's perfume I remembered, but mildew, damp wood, and old air. Dust motes hung in the light like tiny ghosts. This is where you grew up, Becky whispered behind me, running her fingers along the wall. Where I used to sleep. I nodded. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a museum built on the ruins of one. In the living room, the couch was still there. Same spot, different fabric. I ran my hand over it, remembering Becky's little shoes kicked off at the corner, Sarah reading on quiet Sundays, the TV humming in the background. And now it was just silence. I walked into the kitchen. The window over the sink looked out at the backyard where the oak tree still stood. Older, larger, the tire swing long gone. I remembered pushing Becky there, her laughter echoing through the neighborhood. Becky stood beside me, watching my face. Mum says you can stay here if you want, she said softly. I shook my head. No, this house, it's hers now. It doesn't remember me. She looked like she wanted to argue, but didn't. Instead, she slipped her hand into mine. Then at least let it remember us for a little while. That night, Sarah came over. Becky cooked dinner, pasta, simple, quiet. We sat around the table like strangers, pretending to be a family again. The clink of forks and the low hum of the refrigerator filled the space between words. Sarah broke the silence first. They asked me to speak at your hearing, she said. I wanted to, but I couldn't. I looked at her, older now, eyes lined with years of guilt she didn't deserve. You did what you could, I said. You survived. I believed, Ethan, she whispered, voice cracking. I thought I was protecting Becky. I nodded. I know. I probably would have done the same. Tears welled in her eyes. You always defended him. Even when you shouldn't have, I smiled, sad and tired. Some habits die slower than people. She reached across the table, her hand trembling as it found mine. Do you hate me? I shook my head. No, I hate time. It stole more from us than any lie ever could. Becky watched us quietly, her hand resting over both of ours. 3 people connected by blood and years, bound together by silence and forgiveness that came too late. After dinner, Sarah stood by the door, hesitant. You should come by again, she said softly. There's more I want to say. But not tonight, I nodded. Okay. She hesitated, then leaned forward and kissed my cheek. Gentle, brief, full of everything we'd lost and couldn't get back. Then she was gone. Later that night, I wandered the house alone. The floorboards still creaked in the same spots. I found Becky's old room now filled with boxes and dust. On the wall, faint under a layer of yellowing paint, I could still see where Sarah had once written Becky's height with a pencil. Little dates, little lines climbing upward until they stopped in 1989. I ran my fingers over the last mark. 5 years old. That's where time stopped for me. The air felt heavy, thick with ghosts. I sat on the floor and whispered to the silence, I'm sorry. I didn't know who I was saying it to, Sarah, Becky, Ethan, or the man I used to be. Maybe all of them. Outside, the wind pushed against the windows, soft and steady. For the first time, I realized freedom didn't mean going back. It meant standing in the wreckage and learning to breathe again. When I left the house that night, I didn't look back. Some doors once closed stay that way. And maybe that's mercy. Freedom didn't make the world quieter. It made the silences louder. I heard them between streetlights, in the steady ticking of the radiator in my little apartment, in the way people paused when I told them my name, like they were flipping through a Rolodex that might spit out an old headline. Detective Marjorie Kane stopped by once with a paper bag of groceries and a stubborn grin. You eat? She asked. Sometimes, I said. She set the bag down and leaned on the counter. The state approved compensation. It won't touch what you lost, but it's something. Something. The word felt like a sticker that never quite sticks. I thanked her anyway. After she left, I lined the canned soup on the shelf like trophies from a life I hadn't won. I found Pastor John Everett again, older and thin as a bookmark, still carrying his hat like holy ground. We sat in the last pew of a church that smelled of lemon oil and old faith. What do I do with this anger? I asked. He took a long breath. Carry it until it gets tired of being carried. I nodded like I understood. Outside, the bell tolled. I counted each note as if it could buy me back a minute. That night, I wrote a letter to Patty Collins and another to Warden Keller. Thank yous neither of them owed, but both deserved. I signed with a hand that still shook when it remembered keys turning. My phone, a miracle I was still scared of, buzzed with a text from Becky. Dinner tomorrow? I typed yes and stared at the word until it looked like a door I might walk through, or a wall I might walk into. Because freedom, I was learning, is the kind of gift that comes with instructions no one wrote down. And the night ahead felt as long as any corridor I'd ever walked. I went to see Ethan on a Tuesday that carried the smell of cut grass and distant rain. The cemetery sat behind a chain-link fence, the same kind I'd leaned against while the sun burned my eyes on release day. I found his stone by the oak tree. Ethan J. Whitmore, 1958-2024. Someone had tucked a cheap plastic flower into the dirt. Maybe David Sr. would have snorted at that. Maybe Mom would have straightened it with a sigh. I stared at his name until the letters blurred. You did it late, I said, voice rasping. But you did it. The wind pushed through the branches with a sound like soft applause. I forgave you in the dark, I whispered. But forgiveness doesn't refill the years. I told him about Becky, about Sarah's careful smile, about how Dr. Alan Pierce had leaned into the light to make sure the truth didn't slip away with him. You made me carry a lifetime, I said. I don't know what to do with my hands now that they're empty. On my way out, I saw Ray Porter standing near the path, hands buried in his jacket. He hadn't changed much, just more lines, the kind that don't come from laughter. I heard, he said. I should have visited more. I shook my head. You visited enough by not forgetting. We walked to the gate together, two men measuring steps instead of years. At the fence, he pressed a small key into my palm. A garage, he said. Been keeping it paid. It's not much, but the sign's still there. I swallowed against the ache. The old words floated up. Whitmore Auto Repair, honest work since '72. I pictured the lights flicking on. The smell of rubber and oil. The bell over the door ringing a note I hadn't heard since the world was young. Could honest work fix a life this bent? Could a wrench find purchase on grief? I curled my fingers over the key anyway, because some tools are for turning, and some are for holding when the ground moves. The first morning back at the garage, I opened the door and the dust rose like a congregation. Sunlight cut through the windows in white blades, and for a second I saw it all layered. The boy I'd been, the man I became, the stranger I was still learning to carry. I found my name scratched on an old handle, Whitmore. My hands remembered what to do, wiped the bench, sort the sockets, tuned the radio until a song from nowhere arrived. Around noon, Becky rolled up with sandwiches and the sunflower she'd dropped outside the prison. She set it in an oil can and laughed at herself. It's crooked, she said. So am I answered. We'll call it style. We ate on the tailgate, watching the street pass by like we were waiting for a parade that might never come. Mom wants to come by next week, she said carefully. She wants to bring your old wrench set. The words landed soft and heavy. Tell her to bring the one with the scratch, I said. I put my name there so I wouldn't lose it. Becky smiled. Didn't work. Not then, I said. Maybe now. At dusk, I locked up and stood in the doorway, listening to the neighborhood. Dogs' breaks, a kid's laugh, a screen door that didn't slam so much as sigh. I thought about Red McKinley, about men whose names the world wouldn't remember, about the chapel's quiet note, about Cain driving home with her window cracked, a woman who chased the truth long after the clock said stop. Justice had come, late and thin, and it left an outline where a life should be. But outlines are still maps. I traced mine with the tip of the key and felt the absence like a second pulse. I'm here, I said into the cooling air, to the street, to the ghost of my brother, to the boy who used to lock this door without counting. I'm still me. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.